Frank and Peter Gusenberg, and they were the really the bad guys that were part of the 7 that were killed, and these were the 2 hitmen, basically 2 brothers, Frank and Peter, and then of course you had John May, who he was kind of in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was an Irish guy that was looking for a job, so he ended up getting a job as a truck driver for Carthage. So he really wasn't mobbed up. He had like 8 or 9 kids, and so he was just kind of looking for a place to work. Only he picked the wrong one, and he had his dog there, and he had the dog tied up on one of the bumpers of the trucks, and the dog's name was Highball. And then of course you had Reinhard Schwimmer, who a lot of people remember because they called him in different things. They called him Dr. Schwimmer, or he was an optometrist. He really wasn't. His father was a doctor, but he was more of a technician. But he was kind of a gang groupie. He wasn't technically in the Moran gang, but he had money, and he liked to place bets, and he would give the guys money and whatnot. So they liked having him around, and he had a car and had access, obviously, he had ready access to money. So, and he liked hanging around with the guys. He liked to be associated, kind of the thrill of hanging out with the gangsters. And so it was about 10:40 in the morning, and it was cold. It was the typical February in Chicago. And the brilliant part of the plan was that the guys who perpetrated the crime actually came dressed as police officers. So they pulled up in kind of a paddy wagon type of thing, and they came in through the front door, went all the way in the back, lined them all against the wall. They thought it was just a standard shakedown type of thing, so they all kind of went willingly against the wall, and then they opened up, with submachine guns and shotguns. 2 Tommy guns and a bunch of shotguns, and they had I think it was 2 guys actually dressed in Chicago police uniforms, and I think the rest of them were in plain clothes. So people really didn't think much because of the police car outside, and obviously there was a lot of noise. It always surprised me that it wasn't like there were silences on these things, so it kind of surprised me that more people didn't hear the noise. But it was actually the dog barking that supposedly attracted the attention of a woman that lived across the alley from the place. And she sent someone over to check on the dog, and that's when the guy had found the bodies. And then, of course, then the real police came, and kind of the rest is history. So that's kind of the setup for the crime.
Yeah, and you talked about Bugs Moran. Ultimately, they failed to get him. I'd always heard that he kind of showed up late, saw the cop car, and may have kind of went the other direction. Was like, I'm not getting arrested type of thing. I
think I had heard the same thing. Who knows what really happened? Someone did say, I remember reading somewhere that he said he did see a police car, and because they kind of jumped the gun because of Weinshank, they thought, hey, we got the guy here, so let's open it up. And I think it was probably, I'm sure Moran was going to be there, only because you had pretty much his top guys all kind of in the same place at the same time. You have his second command, his bookkeeper, so you had some pretty important guys there at the SMC company. So more than likely he was going to show up. But yeah, I think they just jumped the gun, and fate was on Moran's side at that point. So.
I always thought it was weird myself that Weinshank showed up wearing damn near the exact same thing that Moran wore. A lot of people have made that a point of debate, especially a lot of people I've talked to, a lot of conjecture that I've read about. It's like almost like maybe Moran in his own way might have had a feeling that something was about to go down that day, so he kind of almost had almost like a double,
It could have, absolutely. The more and more you read about just other mob stuff, that people do have feelings. A great book, I don't want to get off topic, but a great book that I had read on the Chicago mob was written by, it was co-written by a Chicago cop who was in the mob, and it was called Mob Cop. And the publisher had asked me to do a review on the book and sent me a copy of it, and it was really, really good. And it was after the Capone era. It was more around the same time as more of the casino stuff going on.
I saw that book at the library this weekend because I was wanting to find another book, sort of on that. And of course, they have Gotti and all the others. But I saw that, for whatever reason, I decided not to pick it up and decided to get the book on its encyclopedia, like 400 pages of serial killers. For whatever reason,
Right.
I passed up. I think maybe Trav and Vic had me hypnotized, and they
yeah, exactly. Like, what? How many serial killers? I wonder what serial killers. No, it was a really good book because he really got very specific. And at first I thought, this guy's crazy to come forward with all this information, but I found out the book wasn't published until after he died. So he was actually, he was planning on writing the book, and he did die of natural causes. He was a Chicago cop. He eventually got busted and went to prison for a while. But he was 20 years on the Chicago police force while he was not working with the mob. He was friends with them. He would give them information. He would help the guys out if he knew any, that type of thing. He wasn't actively, well, I guess sort of actively. Sometimes he would do a couple jewelry heists and maybe hit a delicatessen when it was closed or something like that. But he was involved. Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, supposedly he was a really good cop, and he made a lot of arrests because he knew all the guys involved. So it was kind of, helping both sides. And the mob thought it was fine. I thought for sure once he took a job as a cop, the mob would have, severed all ties with him. But no, they liked the guy and kept him around, and he was useful. He laid out a lot of information about Toya Cardo in the book and what happened, with the burglary on his house and all those jewelry burglars that ended up dead. That's a fascinating story. But like I said, I don't want to get off the topic of the St. Valentine's Day thing. But really good book if you get a chance. So, plug in it.
Hey, to talk a little bit about the aftermath of what happened, they leave. They leave them in their waste. And apparently it sounded like what I had always heard too is that the ones dressed as cops looked like they were taking away a couple of the other gunmen who were obviously dressed as mobsters.
Absolutely.
So they leave. And then talk a little bit about what you know about the investigation of such a thing. I'm always staggered by seeing the newspapers. I mean, can you imagine seeing the newspaper with bodies on the front page like you like that now?
Well, the thing about it is it was spectacular, but at the same time it was the beginning of the end, for Capone and some of these organized mobsters because, the mob had a lot of the cops in their back pocket. I mean, and so they were able to get away with a lot, or a lot was overlooked. And in fact, Prohibition in general, nobody wanted Prohibition to end. I mean, nobody did. Everyone was still drinking. It's like kind of like every time I hear someone say, well, in Prohibition it was a speakeasy. I'm like, yeah, okay. Every place in Chicago that, and I try to get this point across, that before Prohibition, there are so many bars in Chicago. During Prohibition, there were just as many bars in Chicago. They were just overlooked. They did, and the whole term with speakeasy is more or less, the beat cop who's responsible and kind of taking care of his area would just kind of go in, get his hush money, and walk out. And as long as everyone spoke easy and they didn't get into fights and attract attention, then no harm, no foul. So that's why it was really important to keep everything quiet. And if there was a fight, nobody needs to fight because if everyone fights, the whole place gets shut down. And so that was the deal. And so the cops were making 10 or 20 times what their normal salary was during that time. And everyone got to drink, and they drank cheap booze. They got it fairly inexpensively through Capone and other people. And really nobody wanted to end. Even the inspectors, even some of the federal inspectors were taking money on the side. So everyone was making a ton of cash and drinking on top of it. So when Prohibition ended, it was kind of a bummer in a way. But yeah, so as far as the investigation goes, it was kind of a reluctant investigation, only because, like I said, a lot of the cops were in the back pocket of the mob, but at the same time, they couldn't just brush this one under the rug because, like you said, there's 7 shot-up bodies in the newspaper, and they had to do something about it. But it still was, obviously a botched investigation. Nobody was. I mean, McGurn was the only one arrested. 2 of the other guys that were thought to be, I think his name was Anselmi, who was a Capone bodyguard, and I can't remember the other guy's name now. But there were 3 of them that were looked at as 3 of the top suspects, along with a group. I mean, they started thinking that possibly the Purple Gang out of the north, and possibly these Egan Rats, I think they were called, out of St. Louis, if I'm not mistaken. So there were different theories, but the only three they really looked at, two of them were knocked off by Capone. So obviously they knew too much, and so two of them were killed by Capone before they could go to trial, and then McGurn is the only one that actually went, but then he had this alibi, but his blonde girlfriend that basically said, hey, he was with me all day, which I can't see how that would stand up in court, but I guess it did somewhat. And it was really, so nobody was ever charged. So it was kind of and the FBI didn't want to have anything to do with it.
If I'm not mistaken, Ray, wasn't the other gunman, John Scalise? Wasn't that the name of the other guy?
Yes, that was John Scalise. Yeah, you're right.
All right, I just wanted to make sure I had my facts straight.
Yeah, the other guy was John Scalise. And he was whacked along with Anselmi, I believe, those two guys.
Yeah, there's that gangland lore about Al Capone meeting them and the other guy at the dinner party and beating him to death with a baseball bat.
Yeah, I love some of these stories, generally speaking, and again, I hate to go back to the mob cop thing, but he was saying that if they came at you with a baseball bat, it was personal, and the idea was that if they messed up your face, you couldn't have an open casket funeral.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when they were really pissed. If it was just business, they would just pop you in the back of the head with the 22, and then you could have a nice open casket funeral. But in the case where you really piss someone off, they would mangle your face. So if the baseball bat was brought out, it must have been something they screwed up or pissed somebody off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Travis and Vic and I were just talking about it. I did a lot of research. One of my favorites was Albert Anastasia, and I did a lot of research on him, and he used the 22 a lot. So did Gambino and Ray Squiani from Canada. He was one of the first Canadian mobsters. The 22, for whatever reason, was like the favorite thing to do. The favorite way to do somebody was with a 22. I always thought that was funny.
Yeah, it's quiet. It sounds like a cap gun. I mean, if you ever heard a 22 go off, it's like you wouldn't even attract any attention.
That's
Plus,
true.
it does and usually they would do it at contact range, so it's not like they're going to miss or anything.
True.
So it was just kind of the way to do it right behind the ear, and they pop up and a little cap went up, and that was it. So.
One thing that I wanted to jump on real quick was, okay, cops are paid off. You had mayors paid off. You had politicians, all these things that are paid off at the time. There's something else I wanted to explore there, too, is that, crimes, mob crimes and things like that kind of got swept under the rug. Outside of just those reasons, I'm curious. Okay, so we're talking about the 20s all the way to 1929. Not too far removed from the 1800s when, you had all these Wild West murders and things taking place that, kind of were like not a big deal in American history because it was just a commonplace. It is, and again, I'm asking you to put yourself in a time period that's not now, but is that one of the reasons why it was, so easy for gangs in Chicago to just get away with murders willy-nilly up until this point? Is that, murder wasn't quite, as severe as it later would become?
I was
what I mean?
looking at this, actually. I was looking at this because I was invited over to the Victory Gardens Theater, which is, was the Biograph Theater with the whole Villagers thing. And they were doing a play on Nathan Leopold and Dick Loeb, the two murderers of Bobby Franks back in 1924. And, it all, I kind of, that one made sensational headlines because there were two rich kids that killed another rich kid. And, of course, that made lots of headlines on the mob stuff, other than the Valentine's Massacre. And, obviously that made pretty big headlines. But it's very similar from what I've looked into as it is today. In fact, I looked at the murder statistics from, 1923 up until the present time, along with the population of the city, and kind of said, okay, because we get these images, it's like there's these gangland shootings all the time, and cars driving by with Thompson submachine guns, watching Untouchables, and, you think this is going on all the time. The number of murders in Chicago by gunfire was exactly the same in the 1920s as it is now. And the population was almost identical within a couple thousand, which I thought.
Well, I was going to ask you that part, so you already covered that.
Same population, same number of shootings. The only thing that's gone down is the number of individuals killed by police officers. That's like cut by 75%. So the murders are the same, and they're different. I mean, we have the modern day gangs, which a lot of people don't look at as romantically as like the Italian mob, but it's the same thing. It's all shootings over territory, gun